cars, but they sure had a lot of smoke.
Were you able to breathe, Reverend?
Oh yeah, I didn't have any problem. My wife did. She has asthma and other issues, so she had some problems. So we stayed inside as much as we could.
And what did you do while you were inside those casinos?
Well, we stayed in a Residence Inn hotel, and they don't have any casinos at those places. So.
All right.
we went to a funeral that was held in the mortuary, and they didn't have any casinos in the mortuary either. So
what?
No, and the ones that did have casinos, they seemed to have been closed. They didn't have their parking lots were empty as we drove by them.
Hey, everyone. Pardon me, this is Cindy Lou, just letting you know that we are on YouTube. So we are live on YouTube now.
Oh, okay.
And we're just confirming that you have a quorum and that Darlene is here for conducting the meeting. Commissioners, this is Cindy Lou, staff again, just letting you know that the links when they were sent to our panelists this time just came from a different sender. And so we're having a difficulty making sure that everyone is into the meeting. Darlene is working to get into the meeting so that she can begin the meeting as the chair today. I think it'll be maybe 2 minutes more.
It looks like
Darlene has arrived.
She snuck in.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Darlene. How are you?
Hello. And you can hear me okay?
Yes, hello.
Excellent, yes. Excellent. I apologize for being late. Did not have the link to the meeting, so my apologies. I think we are good now. Are there any comments about any commissioners that were not able to join? Is it okay to start? Do we have any updates or feedback on that?
Thank you for checking in. We are still trying to get a few people in. I think if we could just have 2 minutes, it's up to you. I think if 2 minutes more were permitted, we could get more of the commissioners in. Alex, if you could.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Darlene McDonald, and I will be conducting the meeting today. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to our meeting. Our public meeting guidelines are in place to maintain a safe, respectful environment for all to share their thoughts and experiences. The commission may consider a motion to approve the minutes of August the 26th, 2020. Is there a motion?
Reverend Davis, and I would move the approval of the minutes as they were distributed.
I will second it. This is
And you
Batar.
all, we would need to take some people off mute.
I see.
I'm not hearing anyone, so that may be on my end. Hold on one second.
Darlene, this is Batar. I will second the motion.
Reverend Davis made the motion.
Can you, okay, can you guys hear me? Can somebody
We hear
speak?
you. We hear you. Can you hear
I
us?
can't hear anyone. Hold on one second. You guys can hear me, but I cannot hear you. So I'm going to change my speakers. Okay, there we go. We have sound. Okay, so let me back up because I did not hear anyone. So I'm going to allow Cindy Lou the opportunity to inform me if there were any comments about commissioners needing a little extra time and if it was okay to start.
We have many, we are ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, because I didn't hear anything. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the minutes from August the 26th?
Reverend Davis made the motion to approve the minutes of the 16th, the 26th, sorry.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I will second it. This is Batar.
Thank you, Batar. Okay, I will now take a roll call vote. For checking out updates or feedback on that. Thank you for checking in. We are the time and if it was okay to start. That was someone. Was that Patrick? Was that somebody for us?
I heard
Sorry.
you. I heard
Okay.
you.
That was some feedback. We'll go
Okay.
ahead and mute that now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will now take a roll call vote. Reverend Davis,
Yes.
Nicole,
Aye.
myself is yes. Moises,
Yes.
Batar,
Yes.
Verona,
Yes.
Kamal,
I will confirm if Kamal is here. I believe he may be absent.
okay, thank you. Mariana,
Yes.
Tanya,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Luna,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Davinia, okay, Anapesi,
I say we'll be late.
okay. Is Anapesi on the line? Is she going to be late?
She will be late. And
She will be late.
Davina is actually attending on the phone.
Okay,
So Davina, I'll go ahead and unmute now. Davina. You've been given permission to speak, Davina.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. And pardon me if I pronounce this name incorrectly. Olosa?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. How do you pronounce that so I can get it right the next time?
Olosa.
Olasa. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Samantha,
Aye.
Anthony,
Yes.
Abdullah, Abdullah. Okay, Carol,
Present.
Rogelio,
Rogelio.
okay, one more time.
Rogelio.
Wow, okay, thank you. And Desange,
Aye.
aye, okay. Thank you. The motion has passed. We will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is police review discussion. We have Mark Cottrell, Deputy City Attorney, is prepared to provide a brief introduction to provided material and will be available to answer questions from the commission. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Commission Chair McDonald, and thank you, commissioners, for having me today. I believe that most of you have been provided copies of policies and/or other documents that may be relevant to topics that this commission would like to explore. Those, I think I emailed around 24 various policies, as well as agreements like with the school district on SROs, perhaps a link to the Civilian Review Board page, things like that. I am more than happy to address any of those policies that you may be interested in today, but I've been informed that a particular interest today, and perhaps a good use of our time, might be to focus on policy 300, the use of force policy, as well as policy 431, which governs crisis intervention incidents. That being said, I don't want to dictate kind of what you guys want to explore, and I certainly want to just put myself to answer whatever questions you may have or to address any policies you may be interested in.
Well, I'm interested in both of those policies. Also, any kind of de-escalation, and we might not have time to get there, but de-escalation policies.
Thank you, Pastor Davis. That can be covered in the policy 300, the use of force policy. So, you know, I don't want to essentially just recite everything. If there are certain questions as I go through things that any questions you may have, please feel free to interrupt me and ask the questions. Sometimes I'll be looking at two screens here. So if I'm looking off screen, it's because I'm looking at my notes and the policies over here, and I may not see a raised hand. So please just feel free to speak up and interrupt me if you like. So with that, I will start with policy 300. And I think you may have received the updated policy that the department will be implementing as we go forward. I hope all of you receive that. I guess the way to identify it would be, if you were to look at the policy under definitions, there are more definitions than existed in previous policy. There's a definition for de-escalation, definitions for imminent and necessary. If you have hopefully if you're looking at the policy, you're looking at that copy. And the reason why I'm asking if you're looking at the right copy is because I know that I had sent out the old policy before this policy came into effect, and I believe we circulated the new policies after they went into effect. So I will look at the most, oh, sorry.
All right, this is Cindy Lou. I just wanted to clarify the information that was sent out in the packet material that Kaletta sent as an email would have bookmarked the updated policies with the word update in the bookmark title. So when Mark is referring to those 3 that have updates, they are listed in your packet. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy Lou. So on this use of force policy, I will briefly just sort of talk about what's covered in here, and then certainly we can dive into those specific topics if you like. So the new use of force policy, of course, governs when and how force is to be used. It talks about a duty to intercede to prevent an unlawful use of force. It speaks to de-escalation. For the first time in policy, there is a definition of de-escalation, and there is a discussion in policy about when and how to use de-escalation. We also have, like I referenced before, definitions of critical terms when looking at this. These are terms that you might see in state law that looks, for example, in the deadly force justification statute, we look at whether force is imminent or necessary. It lists out factors that help an officer determine what constitutes reasonableness. What is a reasonable use of force? What are the considerations an officer needs to think about before they use force? It also discusses the types of force encountered by officers, as well as the options available to them in rebutting or pushing back on the types of force that they may see. There's a specific section about deadly force itself, as well as policy governing whether they should shoot at or from vehicles, generally discouraged and prohibited. And finally, reporting force. That's a critical thing for the department. So those are some general big topic areas in the use of force policy. It's a lot. As I'm looking at it, we're looking at 14 pages of this policy. If there's any of those topics that the commission would like to address, to the extent I'm able to answer any questions, I'm certainly happy to engage in that, but at least I'd set it up for the commissioners to at least, you guys can have that discussion.
Well, this is Darlene McDonald, and I'm speaking for myself. How shocked I was when I read the newspaper article regarding the use of force, de-escalation policy from the newspaper article, that they were now going to consider de-escalation training, that was not already a part of the training. So it seemed to me that there was a disconnect, either between what we thought was already in place or what's not in place. Is that something that you can speak to? Because when I read that article, I almost hit the floor. I was so shocked by that. And this is in regards to the shooting of the minor boy, the autistic boy. So I was just very, very shocked about that.
Thank you, Commission Chair McDonald. I'm unable to speak to the specifics of that particular case, of course, but to get to your broader question, I believe, and again, I'm not in the department, but it's my understanding that there is de-escalation training that does occur. And I'm not necessarily familiar with the article that you read, but I wonder if the article was speaking to perhaps the change in policy that occurred essentially 2 hours after the incident, where there is specific discussion in this use of force policy about de-escalation tactics or techniques, where it's explicitly defined. But the first part of your question is, and maybe someone from the department could better speak to this. Yes, I believe there is de-escalation training that the department regularly teaches and engages in.
Is there someone that could speak to this? Because the article made it seem like it was something that wasn't already part of the process, which just floored me. I myself is a mother of an autistic young man, and when the entire incident just really unnerved me because I could easily put myself into that situation. And if anyone can speak to, especially de-escalation, when you know that there is someone that's involved that is I don't even want to call this a mental health crisis, because it wasn't a mental health crisis. This is a special needs young man. So that's not a mental health crisis. So is there anyone that can speak to that?
Commissioner Chair McDonald.
Yes.
Chief Brown is here if you would like to ask him the direct question. If you're okay.
Yes, yes, I would love that.
Chief Brown, I've gone ahead and unmuted your microphone.
Hi, good evening, Commission. How are you? Good to see you again. And Commissioner McDonald, yes, I want to reassure you, we have been teaching and employing de-escalation in our training for ever since I became the chief of police. We have taught it in our quarterly trainings. In fact, every one of our quarterly trainings has a component to it. And so we teach it, we implement it. It's an expectation. With these new policies, we're going to try to expand upon it, and we're going to really talk about when we do it, but also report back. Some of the policies talk about reporting your efforts and your steps that you took to de-escalate. So again, we're going to foot stomp that even more into the culture of our organization. One thing that we did a few years ago is we implemented an exceptional tactics de-escalation award. So we actually review different cases that are put forward to the command staff, and we recognize officers that have used exceptional de-escalation tactics, verbal, in different high dynamic situations where they've done an exceptional job and didn't have to use additional force. And we actually give them a medal that they wear upon their uniform. And so as an organization, I think the things that you foot stomp and the things that you expect and the things that you inspect and that you reward people for are going to be, pushed into the culture. So yes, we do. The short answer, yes, we do. And we are going to expand upon it. So we can speak to that at length at some other meeting, but I just want all of you to know that we do that.
Commissioner Chair McDonald. There you go.
Thank you. Before we proceed, are there any other questions for Mr. Cottrell?
The question that I wanted to also ask was about is the use of dogs, is that part of the policy, and how does the policy say that should be done?
Thank you.
Mark?
Sorry, I hit mute. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Yes, generally speaking, yes, deploying a dog for apprehension legally fits within the types of considerations you would think of when using reasonable force, but there is a specific policy regarding canines, and that would be policy 308. And that particular policy sets forth essentially the following: purpose of the canine unit for the department, the responsibilities a supervisor may have. But then to get to your question here, it's essentially the apprehension guidelines. When and how should a canine be deployed to apprehend somebody? And the types of things that they have for that are very similar to what you see in a use of force policy. And if I bring up, let me see if I bring this up. So I can directly answer your question here. Scrolling up here. The things that an officer handling a canine needs to think about when deploying are the following in policy. Whether there is a reasonable belief the suspect poses an imminent threat of violence or serious harm to the public, any officer or the canine handler. Whether the suspect is physically resisting or threatening to resist arrest and the use of a canine reasonably appears to be necessary to overcome such resistance. And whether the suspect is believed to be concealed in an area where entry by other than the canine would pose a threat to the safety of officers or the public. And it goes even further that this is the kind of things that they need to be thinking, that a canine officer should be thinking about. The things we just discussed: nature and seriousness of offense, whether violence or weapons were used or are anticipated, degree of resistance or threatened resistance, suspect's known or perceived age, the potential for injury to officers or the public caused by the suspect if the canine is not used, any potential danger to the public or other officers if the canine is released, and the potential for the suspect to escape or flee if the canine's not used. So that's the long answer. The short answer, Commissioner Davis, is yes, there's a specific policy governing use of canines. 308.
Thank you.
Any further questions before I proceed?
Yes, Mark, I can't remember exactly how you defined this or how you stated it, but as you're going down the list, I don't know if it was like a definition of use of force or there was something down that list that you're going down through. And
Imminent threat?
is that it?
That's the one I had a question about. If there was a definition of imminent threat. I don't know if you mentioned that and I just missed it, but how is imminent threat defined?
So in the new use of force policy, there is a definition of imminent, and that means it's ready to take place, but it is distinct from immediate or instantaneous. So there's, there could be a pause. So when you look at the definition in Webster's of immediate or instantaneous, it almost is like the continuous flow, whereas imminent might not be that continuous flow, but maybe a small break or pause between that. But still a shorter compressed time period is what imminent is meant to convey there, ready to take place. Commissioner Prospero, I'm not sure if that actually answers what you were getting at, or Commissioner Chair McDonald, if that sort of answers your question about how it's defined.
You can go for it, Moises.
Yeah, I can't remember the topic that you had gone over, and I don't want you to go over it again. I'll just look it up again, and then if I have questions, I could bring it up.
Yes. If there aren't any questions, I think it may be important just to highlight in that the new use of force policy, things that may be of interest to the commission. Certainly, I think the definition of de-escalation, imminent and necessary are new things that are important to review. I think that as you go down, 300.2.1, tactics preceding the use of force is also it's a new thing. And I think it's a good, well, I won't put a value judgment, but I think it's new and maybe of interest to the commission. And that one says, it's brief. It says, officers should not place themselves or others in jeopardy by unreasonable, unlawful, or excessive conduct. In my world, that is sometimes called officer-created jeopardy. You certainly don't want to have an officer get into a situation where they're now forced to use deadly force. There should be thinking before they put themselves in that situation. I think that's what that's speaking to. The next part, it's a little more robust than may have existed before, and that's 300.2.2, a duty to intercede. And that means that if another law enforcement officer is in a position to prevent an unlawful use of force, they have a duty to do so if they can do so safely and it's reasonable for them to do so. And they must report that to a supervisor. And there is specific language that prevents retaliation for reporting that.
You said that was 302.2?
Yes, Commissioner Salazar Hall, 300.2.2.
300.2.2.
Going down, the de-escalation section is new, and that talks about the various things officers need to think about when engaging in de-escalation tactics. And I think I'll just read the first part here, but I think it's important to note, when circumstances reasonably permit, officers must use strategies and techniques to decrease the intensity of a situation, improve decision-making, improve communication, reduce the level of force needed, and increase voluntary compliance. And then it goes through a list of potential de-escalation techniques and tactics, short of course, using escalating levels of force. Something that was in policy before, and I think it's really important to note here, 300.3.3, factors used to determine the reasonableness of force. And here, this is more of a defined, it sets out concrete examples that are perhaps not present in case law, like you might hear Graham v. Connor, right? Graham v. Connor is sort of what you hear people talk about that governs whether a use of force by a law enforcement officer is reasonable and therefore lawful. In Graham v. Connor, a court would say that were the officer's actions objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances? And in order to engage in the reasonableness inquiry, you look at the severity of the crime at issue, whether a suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of officers or others, and whether someone is actively resisting arrest or fleeing. And so if you look at these factors under 300.3.3, it's more than that. It kind of fleshes it out and gives better examples of that. So I think that might be of interest to the commission to look at.
So Mark, how are the officers trained in the definitions of immediate and serious threat or serious offense? What is their training on that? Because I know that has very specific meanings in the legal field, but how are they trained in ascertaining immediate and serious?
That's a good question that may be better answered by Chief Brown's training staff. I would imagine that, I mean, I know that there's an academy and their tactics and use of force is something, of course, that they spend a lot of time with. As far as the definitions and how to recognize it and put it in play, I think that I'm unfortunately unqualified to answer that question. Someone from police training would probably be better suited to do so. So I know I'm just sort of kind of going through the policies and highlighting what I think may be important. And I certainly don't want to dwell too much on this, but if there are any other additional questions for the commission, I'm more than happy to move on to the other one that I believe was of interest to the commission for tonight, which was the crisis intervention incident policy. Okay. Before I do that, just one quick note. 300.5 governs the use of deadly force, which I know is a topic of particular interest to this commission as well. And I would note that if you look at it, the first part of it kind of tracks with state law and justification. And that says an officer is justified in using deadly force when the officer reasonably believes that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury to the officer or another person. The next prong, it actually is, it may look the same to state law, but there's a slight distinction that probably makes it elevates it above state law, the requirements. So in this one, it says, an officer may use deadly force when necessary to stop a fleeing subject when the officer has probable cause to believe the individual has committed or intends to commit a felony involving the infliction or threatened infliction of serious bodily injury or death. And in that conjunction, there's and the officer has probable cause to believe there's an imminent risk of serious bodily injury or death to any other person if the individual is not immediately apprehended. State law, instead of saying and where the conjunction is, it's an or. So in state law, either one of those prongs, if they're satisfied, there's a justified finding. Department policy, in order to be within policy, you have to meet both of those prongs if your deadly force use fits that scenario. So I will move on to the crisis intervention policy if there's no other questions or comments about the use of force policy.
And before you do, Mark, let me just add that we can schedule a briefing with one of the Salt Lake City Police Department training for next meeting. And I think that was mostly for you, Nicole, as well, and related. Okay, thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, this is Kaletta. I will follow up with Salt Lake City Police Department to get that scheduled for you all.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So policy 431 governs what the department calls crisis intervention incidents. And I'll just give you my brief overview and then we can dive into the language and policy if you like, if you feel there's time. So this policy says it's out there to govern interactions with those experiencing mental health or emotional crisis. It's cognizant that there is a potential of miscommunication in instances involving persons experiencing mental health or emotional crises. And it notes that an officer may have to make difficult judgments about a person's mental state or intent. The policy sets out definitions with respect to a person in crisis. It's a pretty extensive definition, and it defines what their crisis intervention team is. The policy recognizes those who may benefit from an approach that recognizes someone in crisis. It tries to explain to officers, and I imagine the training gets to this as well. It explains signs that an officer should look for to identify those who are in crisis, and suggests tactics that may be deployed and an approach that may be deployed to engage with those individuals. It asks the department.
If I could interject for just a quick second, I think this is where maybe some improvement could be made in just reviewing this. This does not, Lyndon Cameron's specific issues don't completely fit from the outset within this policy. He may have been experiencing anxiety, but I think the larger issue that I think we're going to keep coming across are people with developmental delays or who are on the spectrum. And I think this policy could be updated to reflect those persons in our community that do need to be protected. Because my reading of this, yes, the engage in erratic, disruptive, or dangerous behavior that may be accompanied by impaired judgment, while that could fit the definition of what Lyndon Cameron was experiencing and other people with autism spectrum disorder could be experiencing, it doesn't from the outset include those individuals in this policy. I don't know if that was an oversight. I doubt it was an intentional omission. I'm sure it was more of an oversight, but I think this could be improved to include people with those issues.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar-Hall. I mean, certainly I would, if there's any additional feedback on this policy or any other policy to bring back to the department, I think it's one that they're willing to listen to and take. And I'm certainly happy to be a messenger on that particular one as well. But perhaps as we go through this, there may be additional questions, concerns that are identified that we also want to bring back as well. So just want to offer that up. I think that's a good suggestion by Commissioner Salazar-Hall.
And Darlene, I would appreciate your input on this as well. I am only tangentially involved with those communities. I'm not directly involved with any of them, but I'm just very aware of some of the challenges and hurdles that people.
Yeah, very much so. Because as more and more people are diagnosed with autism, and you know, Utah is very high on that list, you go from a child with autism to an adult with autism quickly. And how they're treated. I mean, Lyndon was 13, you know, and they cannot, at least many of them cannot comply. They just, there is an avenue of which that can happen. Many are not verbal, or even if they were verbal, just a change in surroundings sets them off. And that creates a situation, a very dangerous situation just like that, and they cannot comply to the instructions that being had. So this policy, I like Nicole, definitely need to, there's some changes that definitely needs to occur there, and just really work with professionals in this field on how to recognize it. And again, I don't want us to get to the point, and this is for another discussion most likely, where we're having police officers becoming social workers, right? And because they're not. So, but there's specific types of training and recognition of what's actually happening with a person that is autistic, that's on the spectrum, and what's actually happening and how you engage that person. And it's not necessarily with law enforcement. That's
I'm curious, based on that, Darlene, with the upcoming section of this policy with the MCOT use, the mobile crisis outreach teams. And I'm curious how robust those teams are and how available they are to law enforcement. And if that's an area we could look at recommendations for funding so that law enforcement can work more on, more traditional law enforcement, and we have subject matter experts that can address the MCOT issues. And there's a lot of detail that's important there about the safety and the level of violence on a case like that, right? So that's all critical. But does anybody know how robust those teams are and how active they are?
I appreciate what Steve's comment is, and I hope that maybe in the future, I know we're talking about policy here, but I mean, there in some of the literature we've been provided through, it talks about crisis team interventions and community treatment teams to support our officers. So I hope those are conversations that we can have in the future to support officers out there when they're dealing with folks that are experiencing mental health conditions and problems.
I think that's an absolutely valid point, Commissioner Guzman, and I'm wondering if those MCOT teams shouldn't be more bolstered, as Commissioner Andrew Worden indicated. I wonder if we can't get more social workers on board those teams and ones who are more specially trained to handle a broad spectrum of disorders and issues, so that we don't have a repeat of this incident. And of course, I can't speak to what occurred that night and whether an MCOT team was deployed to assist the Cameron family, but I agree, Commissioner Andrew Worden, I think we need to find out what, how well funded and how those teams are put together, and if we can maybe make those more robust.
Yeah, and I'm curious too, the discussion of autism as a mental illness and how it applies to the policy. I'm not an expert on that by any means, but I'm curious if the CIT training that officers go through embrace that area, and if not, if there's some autism awareness that could be part of the training protocol for law enforcement. I haven't had CIT myself. Do you know, Lieutenant Suarez, have you had that training? Do you know what's on there? Okay.
also another thing to be aware of is the differences in age, because when you're talking about sending out someone for a 13-year-old versus someone that's 22, that's going to look very different. And mostly because, unless, of course, the parent has guardianship, because you get into a situation where they're an adult and your hands are tied as to what can actually happen in that situation. And that has happened to me before. So I mean, unless you have guardianship, if they're over the age of 18, it's very little you can do as far as getting help. When you call someone and get resources, say, hey, there's a mental health crisis going on, and they get there and they don't say the right thing, your hands are tied at that point.
So I would make a motion that this specific issue be addressed more in depth at a later meeting, where we can hear from Chief Brown as to what kind of training the officers and the MCOT teams receive on autism and mental health, and the construction and I guess robustness of the MCOT teams.
Darlene, can I add one more thing to that?
Yes.
I was just reviewing the policy, and there's a policy 307 that talks about officer response to calls. And usually that response starts with the dispatchers getting that call from the community. And I'm just wondering if we can add to finding out what type of training our dispatchers are also getting, because they can, sometimes will set the tone of the officer's response to that call. So I think that we should include dispatchers and see what type of training they're also getting, and they know how to reach the MCOT teams or what's going on in those situations.
I will amend my motion to add Commissioner Suarez's input because that is a very good point.
This is Reverend Davis. I would second the motion.
Okay, we will now take a roll call vote. Reverend Davis?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald, could I just make a comment
Yes.
for discussion before I think the MCOT teams are external to the police department. So there's CIT within the department, and I believe MCOT is external. So our commission or our request, our motion, excuse me, is going to be partly working with the department and partly working with mental health providers outside of the department. So just clarification as we vote on that.
Okay, and not to okay, let's get this motion. Okay, Reverend Davis? You're on mute. I'm just doing a roll call vote.
All right, yes.
Okay. Nicole? Yeah.
Aye.
Motion. Yeah. And I'm an aye. Moises?
Yes.
Batar?
Yes.
Verona?
Yes.
Kamal?
Kamal is absent this evening.
Okay, thank you. Mariana?
Aye.
Tanya?
Aye.
Stephen? Stephen? Luna?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Davinia?
I believe she has left the meeting for a moment.
Okay. Anna Pesci? She was on the phone as well, right?
And Apese was coming in late, and it doesn't look like she has arrived.
Okay. You're gonna have to forgive me again. Olose? Olasa?
Yes, that works. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Samantha?
Yes.
Okay. Anthony?
Yes.
Abdullah?
He's absent tonight.
Is absent tonight. Okay. Carol?
Yes.
I'm gonna mess your name up. Rogilo.
Rogelio.
Rogelio. Okay. I gotta make a note of that. Is that an I?
Rogelio.
No, I mean, do you approve the motion? I'm sorry. Desan?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you all. And that motion's passed. Thank you, Nicole. And I'm gonna go back to Mark, because I don't think were we finished. I don't think we were finished yet. Correct?
I think that you guys get to tell me when you're finished. I don't want to be too presumptuous. I know I've taken up a lot of the commission's time this evening, and I want to be cognizant of that. If I might just take one more moment to just finish out on policy 431. I know it was sort of kind of what was discussed here, and you'll be getting more information, but the policy does speak to the type of training that officers are to receive with respect to crisis intervention incidents. And it says that new officers should receive what they call Tier 1 certification, which is 40 hours of training when they first join the department. And then they allow, if they want to elect for Tier 2, that would be annual refreshers, 4-hour training each additional year. And the highest tier is reserved for those who want to become CIT instructors. And I also believe that they have a training on what they call invisible disabilities, which would cover things like autism. I'm not exactly sure what that entails, and so that might be a question for the commission to ask whomever may come and speak to that. That's all I really have, unless there are specific questions, because I want to be respectful of your time.
I really appreciate your time.
Madam Chair, might I ask Mark quickly, do you distinguish between the training that's in-house and the training that happens at post?
So they're the Salt Lake City Police Department, they're a satellite post academy. So they do their own post, and they have their own training, officers, their own division, and they do their own training for their new recruits, as well as annual ongoing training. They may have training courses that are allowed to be taken off-site, but for the most part, the training unit in the department handles its training.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for your time. And we are going to go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. We do have public comments tonight. So we will discuss, the next agenda item, which is a discussion about the suggested partner pair program with Salt Lake Police Department. We do have that.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, this is Chief Brown. I'm back again. In preparation for our conversation tonight, I have Roberta Mixon's letter, and I've reviewed that. I would really like to get your feedback, and I know that you understand what Roberta was speaking about, and we can certainly build that type of relationship or an officer assigned to each of you. Is that, I need you to give me a little feedback. Would you like that to be just one officer assigned to each of you that you could reference, that you could talk, that you could build those relationships and have those hard conversations with? Or would you like me to identify a pool of officers that you could reach out to on different areas of expertise? Maybe we could have somebody that is a CIT post-trained officer. Maybe we could have somebody from SWAT, gangs, patrol, and maybe detectives that you can ask questions of, and we can rotate them, or they can be, but I really like the idea of having them assigned to you for at least a period of time, so that you can build those relationships, break down those walls, and have those conversations. I think that's very important. But I really want to get your feedback as to what I can do to best facilitate this relationship building component of this commission.
Can we do both? Can we start off with individuals and then have a specific group that we can direct questions to if we have informal questions?
Well, can I remember the last time you tabled the discussion, because I did not think this was a good idea. And I thought I remember that you said we'd come back and talk about it, and I could come back with more discussion on why I feel this way. So I don't know how you want to proceed, but I do want to address that. This is Carol, sorry. Hi, Chief Brown.
Hi, how are you doing, Commissioner? And Commission and Madam Chair, if the commission would like to have further conversation, and I do remember Carol talking about that, I'm available to you anytime, and I can maybe put together a few models, but there may be value in having someone assigned to you for maybe a month, and then we can rotate them. Or if you see an area that you really have an interest in and you'd like to talk to that person, we could do that too. I mean, I'm flexible. I want to be at your disposal. I think there's a lot of great officers here that could give you valuable insight as to what the culture of our organization is and how they can help you as a commission move forward.
I would like to bring up some issues, but however you want to proceed, I really want to address this tonight because it's been weighing on me. So however you think we should proceed.
I would like to hear from Carol and other thoughts.
I would too.
I would too.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the suggestion that was offered. I also worked in law enforcement before, so I know what it's like to be in the environment. But so I have several concerns. First and foremost, when I asked what was the purpose for doing this, I think I heard someone say to humanize one another. So first and foremost, I want to say that I don't dehumanize law enforcement. I don't think that that's a good way to practice. But I did look up, what does it mean to humanize a person? Humanizing can help to break down enemy images or damaging stereotypes. That's true. Okay, we can do that. But I, as a citizen, one person, me, Carol, sitting down with law enforcement will not change someone's mind on humanizing. So when I suggested training at the last meeting, someone said, I said, implicit bias, and they said, well, we're already doing that. Well, as I see it, it's not necessarily working at this time, or there needs to be more training outside of implicit bias. One of the things that I think before sitting down with law enforcement that we need to do is there needs to be more education on studying the history of policing. Why are situations like they are right now? This is an ongoing thing in the United States of America. It's nothing new. A 3-year-old doesn't know racism. So it's taught and it's a learned behavior. So it could be, and we need to think about this, that people that come into law enforcement are coming into law enforcement with biases that they're not even made aware of. So sitting down with me is not going to change your mind. I'm one person. When you go out, after you sit down and talk to me, and you go out on the street to start doing your work, you may have an encounter with someone who looks like me, but isn't acting like me. And so then I didn't humanize you for that person. I only humanized me and you. So I think that that's something that we need to think about. I was also told, someone says, well, law enforcement feels under attack. I understand that. I do believe that they feel under attack, but so do a lot of Black citizens in the United States right now. So I sent the Pew report, and I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at it, but I have just some notes that I don't know if the chief received it or not. But in items 6 through 10, in the last sentence, it says, this was a Pew report done across the United States. A majority of Black officers, 57%, said that incidents of racism, incidents were evident that, I'm sorry, I read it wrong, so let me just pull it out from this paper. A majority of Black officers, 57%, said that such incidents were evident of a broader problem. So that's something that we need to think about. 27%, only about a quarter of the police officers, 27% of white officers and 26% of Hispanic officers agreed. And then when you look at that graph, it's number 7. It says 68% of law enforcement believes that there is a large standing bias against police, while only 35% have a genuine desire to hold officers accountable. Only 35%. That's not a good number. So there's a police divide. White officers, 92% of our country believe that 2% of our country has made changes for Black people, Blacks equal rights, while 69% of Black police officers. White citizens, 57%. Black citizens, 84%. 69% of white community members say relationships are good. 47% of Black officers, 60% of Hispanic, and 60% of Asians. And then lastly, 93% of officers say fatal encounters between police and Blacks have been harder for police officers. 93% of officers saying each has happened in their department as a result of high profiling incidents. Only 70% of officers have been more reluctant to use force. Only 76%. I mean, that's a number that to me is high. So to me, if Black law enforcement is having a problem in-house, then that's a problem. I don't know if you have done reports like this in Salt Lake City or if it has been done in Utah, but I think before we sit down with the police, we need to do a study like this to see where law enforcement stands mentally. How are they feeling about race relations inside the department? An anonymous survey, something like that. But a research needs to be done because, you know, just like Darlene said, you have a law enforcement coming into a community. You don't know me. You've been called to my house and you don't know me. I like the idea of community policing, but perhaps that's not a good idea for Salt Lake City. But I think it's good to get to know the people in the community before you get to know me. So that's, I'm gonna leave it at that, but that's why I don't think it's a good idea right now. I just think there needs to be more education in-house. There needs to be surveys in-house before I sit down with you. I'm done.
Now, do we want to consider another motion to discuss how we want to move forward with that? Maybe as a commission in a closed session, perhaps. We have to, we're definitely going to honor what Carol has said, and we can come to a decision on how we feel that we can move forward with that.
So Commissioner Shifflett, I think you have an incredibly valid point, and I do like your idea about an in-house study. I did read that article earlier today, and it's eye-opening. It is. And I think there is some value in conducting similar research within the Salt Lake City PD so we can get an idea of where those questions stand. And I think we could probably even use those same questions as long as we can. I don't know if there's some kind of intellectual property issue there, but if we can use those same questions, I'd be in favor of using those same questions. But I still think there is still some value in us being paired up with law enforcement, I guess on a voluntary basis. I don't think I'd want to force anyone to do something they're not comfortable doing. But I do think there's still some value if we're going to be making recommendations to Salt Lake City police officers about how they're going to do their job. I think they need to feel heard as well. I don't think they're going to be incredibly, and I'm totally speaking just theoretically, I don't know that they would be appreciative of us just dictating how they should do their job when we've never done it. We've never talked to them. And of course, I've talked to Salt Lake City police officers. I'm an attorney. I've worked with them in the past. And I think if we're going to have buy-in from everybody, I think we do need to, on a voluntary basis, pair up with them one-on-one and maybe do have some point people within the department to ask questions of. So they're not always burdening Chief Brown with having to be at our meetings every single time, unless he wants to, of course.
Reverend Davis, I would agree with Carol's perspective as well, and suggest that perhaps one way that we can get to know or be known is by being paired with an officer or a group of officers, at least on specific topics. I think ride-alongs and other kinds of experiences would be helpful, and perhaps we ought to consider some of those as options for what we do for the future.
You know, and this may be for many of us, I live in an all-white community. I think I've seen one or two other African Americans. So, and I remember my daughter-in-law saying, if the police has to come to this house, I have to warn them that there are Black people in this house. And, you know, that's fearful for her. So those are things that, you know, we also have to consider when law enforcement is called, like similar to what Darlene was saying.
I totally empathize with what you're talking about, Carol. When you look like me and I think about calling 911 and I have tattoos all over my body, I do have to worry about those things, right? But at the same time, I also do believe that building relationships, we got to do it. But I don't want to force anybody that doesn't feel safe or isn't there yet. So I was also leaning towards the volunteer. You know, if you're up for it, great. Or even sworn versus civilian, maybe civilians, if you'd be willing to meet with civilians that work in the department, that could provide, again, another view, another perspective. They provide a lot of support and a lot of great service as well. So they could provide us some good information as well. I would like if Chief Brown would come with some different models that maybe we could look at. And I love giving Chief more work since he doesn't have enough to do. And bring some models and maybe we could look at them over during the week, and then we could discuss them on our next meeting.
I would second that motion, Moises.
Yeah, that speaks to my thought as well. I would like to see the different models. I absolutely believe it should be done on a volunteer basis. My personal thoughts on the issue is we don't know what we don't know. When things and incidents occur, and it's so easy to jump to conclusions of how certain things went down and why they happened, especially when it involves firearms or police action, especially firearms. There are many people who have never fired a weapon, many, I'm one of them. And you don't know what you don't know as to how exactly it works. And until you actually fire a weapon and get into just to even the thought or the feel of pulling a trigger, what that is actually like. And I would personally like to do a ride along or to pair off with an officer to understand, and also just to be heard and to allow them to be heard as well. And like someone has said, we are going to be making recommendations about law enforcement. We can't make recommendations about something we have never seen up front and close. I mean, at least not in my perspective. We're telling them to do something without having an understanding really of what it is that they're doing. And I think that we need to at least just get there and see and just be in front of them. That's my perspective. So Chief Brown, you ready to get to work?
Madam Chair, anything you tell me to do, I'm on it. Mr. Posteros, thank you for the work.
I'd like to ask, if you could provide us some different models that we could look over. And again, this will be a total volunteer basis. We will not force anyone to do anything that they're not comfortable with. I personally would like to, I like the thought of pairing off with a person and developing that relationship. But if there's a subject matter expert in a different field, I may want to speak to that person. So I would like that option as well, but we'll let you come to us with whatever models that you can come up with, that you have.
And also, Chief Brown, what is the feasibility of conducting research as Commissioner Shifflett recommended? I don't want that to fall through the cracks. I do think that's valuable.
That was my question. Thank you very much, Nicole.
Very.
Commissioner Salazar Hall, we can certainly, I don't think that'd be an issue. we needed to develop the surveys and then get them loaded up and get them put out. So it may take a couple of weeks to get those done, but there could be value. There's value in doing that too. So.
And can you look into maybe using the same questions that the Pew Research study used? I thought they were particularly well worded.
I will do that, certainly.
Thank you. I appreciate
I
that.
think
You're the researcher now, huh?
I'm coming to you.
I'd like to, I think that the conversation is really valuable. I like what Carol's saying. I don't see why we can't do both. And one of the things, as a social worker and as, you know, a person from the Native community, I think that I like not only one-on-one, but also like group discussions as well. And I think that I would feel comfortable in both realms to share not only my experience, knowledge, wisdom, profession, like what I do as a social worker, but one of the things that I really enjoy doing with all groups of people is talking circles. And I think that gives people the opportunity to not only ask questions of even maybe myself as a citizen who has had experiences, positive and negative with law enforcement, but also to be able to ask questions, get my thoughts, insights, and experiences, be able to ask officers the same thing. And I think that there's a cultural exchange that can happen within those types of talking circles. And in the talking circle, it allows people to kind of get a sense of maybe where some of the native culture comes from and how the talking circles work. For everybody, but also again, it's also a cultural exchange there. So if there's anything I can do to help our recommendations to the city council and the mayor, if this is something that will enhance that, I'm all for it. And again, I think we can accommodate Carol's thoughts and expectations and do the same thing with engaging with officers. So I'm excited for where we're going. Thank you.
And I think it's really important to remember that we have got to, it's online, research the history of policing. Because when you research that, you will see where some people are coming from. It has not changed in many instances.
I wanted to say something about Carol's talking about histories too. I was talking to an elder of mine recently, and he was telling me that the idea of protect and serve came from Indigenous warrior society, and it's gone so far away from that. Protect and serve came from warrior society of Indigenous people, because the men that were protecting the community were servants. They were serving the women and children during feast times. They were picking up and organizing and taking care of the vulnerable people in the community. And he said it's really hard to see where that culture has gone to now, because it's, even though it's on the police cars and it says protect and serve, if we look at it from an Indigenous perspective, it's so far from protecting and serving it from a warrior society standpoint. So the history of that is valuable, along with the history of what Carol's talking about. There's a lot of places we can go with this. And so I thank Carol so much for bringing up history and research and looking into it in that way.
Thank you for that. And back to piggyback on that, while I was home, because I'm not from Utah, we got together with law enforcement, the community did, and a couple of the elders brought to the attention of the younger law enforcement and how they don't know the communities. They've moved in from all over state, and of course I'm from Maryland, so you have Maryland, Washington, and Virginia, and they were saying how law enforcement needs to go back and look at the histories of these communities and look at how people engage with one another, so that you can understand why there's this fear of law enforcement or why people don't trust law enforcement. So those things are important: getting to know your communities, getting to know people who are walking in these communities.
I hate to drag this on a little bit longer, but I would love to hear at least a youth voice. Rogelio, would you be willing to give your thoughts on?
Put them on the spot, Moises.
You're on mute, Rogelio.
You're on mute, brother.
Well, with the partnering program, I think it'd be interesting to get just to see different like people from the policing department, or like see where they specifically work at. Like they said SWAT, or maybe just someone who's just a regular police officer, or maybe who's just someone who's a new officer, and what their perspectives are and how they're feeling for it. So I'd like to get a mix of people in that. So it's just like a range from like fresh person barely entering the police commission to someone who's been there for years and knows what they're doing. That'd be something I'd like to see. But personally, from that, that's fine. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
All right. Thanks for your 2 cents. Next
Thanks.
time we want 5 cents.
Well, I want to thank everyone for their comments on that, because that was a great discussion. And Carol, you really just nailed it with the history. I speak about that a lot. And it is so very important to understand how we got here, and so that we don't make the same mistakes of the past. It's very important. Are there any other comments before we move on? Remember, we do have public comments tonight. I want to thank everyone who have been able to stay. Thank you for staying on. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comments. Public comments will be regularly scheduled item on our agenda. Listening sessions are also in our plan to create more opportunity for people to engage with us as we thoughtfully consider recommendations from our community to the elected officials of Salt Lake City. This is our first public comment period. We're all learning, and we are navigating this new opportunity as a full commission. There will be changes to our process. Thank you in advance for your patience and engagement. Individuals interested in commenting will need to follow the established public meeting guidelines to maintain a respectful environment. Comments must not use discriminatory language referring to a person or group based on religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, or any other gender identity factor. Comments that disrupt the meeting, intimidate other participants, or cause safety concerns may be muted by staff. If a caller does not follow the guidelines, a single warning from the conducting commissioner will be given. If the caller continues to comment without adhering to the guidelines, staff will mute the audio. Here's how public comment will work. The meeting staff support will call the name of the commenter at the top of the queue, followed by the next 3 names. This notice will help people be prepared to speak. If your name is called and you do not wish to speak when staff states your name and unmute your microphone, please share that you are only listening and staff will move on to the next person. If you do wish to speak, when staff unmutes your line, please state your name and the timer will begin. Commenters will be provided 1 minute to share comments. At the conclusion of the time, staff will announce time and the commenter's microphone will be muted. Thank you for listening and following these guidelines. Staff support, please provide your first commenter's name, followed by the next three.
Thank you, Commissioner. First commenter this evening is Alexis Pinheiro, followed by Felicia Richards, Beverly Hawkins, and Irene Oda. So Alexis, your microphone is unmuted. Alexis, are you there? I almost think I can hear you. Can you speak a little louder? Chair, I will come back to Alexis. If we can move on to Felicia Richards. Felicia, if you would go ahead and.
Oh, perfect. I think you can hear me now, right?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So this is a time where I can just ask a question about what we've been discussing.
The commission is here to listen to your comment, and the determination of dialogue and answering the question I will leave to the commissioner chair tonight. So you do have 1 minute of time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Well, thanks for having me. I guess one thought I wanted to bring up was I heard someone speak about SWAT briefly, and I recently heard that they had a really good, success at, I don't want to say de-escalation, but I'm not thinking of the correct terminology, but I'm wondering if maybe we can bring more of SWAT team expertise, specifically in Utah, because of some of the successes that they've had. And I know that a lot of the discussion today was about like ride-alongs and learning. And I think maybe we could learn more from them too. So I just thought I would bring that up. Yeah, done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'll go ahead and go back to Alexis just to see if we have audio this time. Alexis, are you there? Okay, continue to troubleshoot on that one. Thank you for your patience. Next, I have Beverly Hawkins, followed by Irene Ota, and then Tandra Robinson. Beverly, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I had just made a comment in response to Commissioner McDonald's concerns about de-escalation training that I had, and Chief Brown may have addressed this, but I had a conversation with the Assistant Chief of Police in which I asked the same question, and he identified that de-escalation training isn't something distinct in itself. It's something that is part of every kind of training that they do for Salt Lake City police officers. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Irene Oda. Following Irene, I will come back to Alexis, and then Tandra Robinson. Irene?
Irene doesn't have audio on the computer that she's using. So she's using the chat.
Thank you. We'll work on that as well. Thank you very much for letting me know. I'll go ahead to Tandra Robinson. Tandra, your microphone is unmuted if you want to share your comment.
Sorry, I forgot I needed to unmute myself. Hi, commissioners. Hi, Chief Brown. I just wanted to kind of maybe add some additional areas for focus as we talk through policies. One of the things I didn't hear mentioned was the accountability or the consequence. You know, Chief Brown mentioned that they have the reward for officers that do show not only the opportunity, but the willfulness to de-escalate. And that's great. I think we should definitely be doing more to lift those people. But what other types of accountability can we put in place in these policies so that as we're talking about like use of force, imminent threat, where we're setting the consequence for the other side of that motivation system, you know, that we have a reward and a consequence. Where can we talk about consequence in these policies, or I guess more specifically, accountability?
Thank you.
I think that is a valid question that we should probably include in a further discussion. I know that's something that's been has been mentioned as one of the means to moving beyond some of these issues of excessive force or excessive use of force is accountability and consequences. We won't get anywhere without that. Thank you, Tandra.
I agree with that. I think consequences and accountability are essential to any kind of effective policy.
Thank you. I will go ahead and move to the next commenter. We'll see if Alexa has audio. Alexis, are you there? Okay. We'll go to Andrew Riggle, followed by Dante James, who will then be followed by Amy Donaldson.
Okay, can we address Ms. Oda's question? Because I can answer that one pretty quickly. And her question was, are there any defense counsel because they can offer some perspective on the impact of policing in the community? I don't think anyone here is an attorney except for me. I know Commissioner Benori is a former attorney, or I guess a retired attorney, recovering attorney. Ms. Oda, I am a former defense attorney. I was trained as a criminal defense attorney in law school and did an internship with Legal Defenders Association. I worked as a parental defender in the juvenile courts in the 3rd District Court for 3 years. I have some perspective, and I still have a lot of friends who are public defenders, both in the state and federal courts. I can provide some of that perspective, and I do have close relationships with those defense counsel to get their perspective. Let me know if there's a follow-up to that question.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar Hall. I'll move to Andrew Riggle, followed by Dante James, and then Amy Donaldson. Andrew?
Yes, this is Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, all right. I wasn't sure how to unmute in a webinar environment rather than a normal one. I represent the Disability Law Center, and we've submitted some information and recommendations, which we hope you receive. And the basic gist, and I think you all have gotten to it a little bit this evening, and we greatly appreciate it. But is our desire not to take any of the focus away from the importance of the discussion around racial equity, but also to have a recognition and a conversation, whether it's with this group or with another body, about the experiences of people with Utahns and particularly residents of Salt Lake City with law enforcement and disability, and perhaps the intersection of disability and race and the experience of individuals with law enforcement. So we appreciate you beginning you clearly beginning that discussion this evening, and we look forward to being an active participant in it with you going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. I haven't had, this is Commissioner Salazar Hall. I haven't had a chance to review those, but I do look forward to working with the Disability Law Center. Thank you so much.
I did want to say thank you, Andrew, for your letter. It was very, very insightful. You had a lot of amazing points in there. And I did earlier, I did it through chat on, which I won't do again, but I did bring up the Disability Law Center's idea and recommendation of rigorous training that's consistent and ongoing. So thank you for your letter, and I really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. We're getting disproportionate minority contact. Students with disabilities were the highest in that negative contact. And of course, that intersectionality with race, ethnicity is huge. So we're definitely going that way, and keep pushing us.
Yeah, and I also want to say thank you to Andrew as well. I've had the pleasure of working with him previously on healthcare issues, and I thank you for bringing this to the table and also just working with us, continuing to work with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dante James, and followed by Dante is Amy Donaldson. And Amy, I did get your note that you do have a question for the commission, so we'll go ahead and take that verbally. It does help in a public meeting to pose questions to the commission in the context where everyone can hear, as we do have we may have call-in users that would not be able to see the chat. So go to Dante James, followed by Amy Donaldson. Dante?
Thank you, and good evening, commissioners and Chief Brown. I am with the Gemini group, working with the Langdon group, who is working on finishing a contract so we can be the facilitators for your commission. So really just wanted to come on just to let you know that we are kind of listening, watching, getting a sense of what's going on. So hopefully we won't be able to walk in quite as cold as you might expect. So just wanted you to know that we are here and sending you best wishes as you work through this process. So thank you.
Ooh, it was a good thing we weren't talking bad about you this time.
He was grading us. That's what he was doing. He was grading us.
All right, I'll go ahead and go to Amy Donaldson.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm actually covering this for the Deseret News, and I'm not exactly sure how since I'm a technology wizard, I've somehow signed up for public comment. But I do have a question. I've been watching you guys from the beginning, and I would ask you, what are you going to do, or how are you going to handle looking at the difference between written policy and actual practice? Thank you.
Well, I'll
This
start.
is Jeff Davis, and I would just say that that's been one of the issues that we've been bringing up constantly, is that we want to know what's in writing and in policy, but we also want to know what actually happens. And then we will make some recommendations about both of those if need be.
I guess that's also part of the reason I would like to have that kind of that paired partnership as well. I mean, I do work with law enforcement, but I also work with a variety of fields that have policy and they train, and it all looks good on paper. But when you go, I'm an evaluator. I do a lot of evaluation, and so when I go evaluate, I see that they really aren't following policy. They're not following best practice. And as a practitioner, I sometimes would fall into that as well. So I think we do have to have some observations as well. And maybe part of this discussion about studying, conducting studies, maybe that should be part of that as well. Because there is oftentimes a big gap between policy and actual practice.
Thank you. Next, I'll go ahead to, Oh, my list just disappeared. I'm sorry. Alexis, just checking again if you have audio. And it doesn't appear we have audio from Alexis. So Commissioner Chair McDonald, that is all we have for public comment tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy. And I want to say thank you for all your comments. The commission will now move to open discussion portion of the agenda.
The items, Reverend Davis, the items that were suggested that we take a look at, accountability with consequences, disability discussion, and what SWAT may bring. I think we find a way to integrate those into our agenda one at a time, and perhaps have a discussion among ourselves about those items.
That last question about policy and practice has got me thinking. I would hope that the facilitator, the firm, would really help us on that. But I think that's something that we should all think about. How is it that we can assess and provide recommendations? Because that is often a gap. I do trainings, and just because you do trainings doesn't mean that it's learned. You know, I taught for decades, and it doesn't mean that students leave with that information to practice. So I would like for us to really think about that.
I agree.
I agree with both of those. And I think I would like to start taking a look at how school resource officers operate in the Salt Lake City School District.
Are they still in the Salt Lake City School District?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yes, they are. There's the memorandum of understanding, I think was sent with our meeting packet tonight. I've had the chance to review it twice now, once kind of a skim through, the next a little more in depth. We had the power outage. We were without power for about 5 days and got a lot of reading done in that time, but I did get a chance to read that more in depth. And I do have some concerns as to how school resource officers are operating within Salt Lake City schools. I recognize there's a statewide policy, and I would want to address any of my concerns just in the context of Salt Lake City schools. So I'm wondering if we can maybe form a subcommittee that would address school resource officers, because it is kind of a specialized field. And I'm not going to say that I'm a specialist in elementary, high school age children at all. I touch those areas of expertise only because I work with custody issues in family law, but it is something that I've been interested in for quite some time, even before I joined the Human Rights Commission. So I'm wondering if we could form a subcommittee to address school resource officers and maybe work with the Salt Lake City School Board and the incoming superintendent on how we can either improve that policy, the memorandum of understanding, or what we can do to help our children of color.
And may I suggest that you also contact Michelle Loveday, Nikki Walker, and maybe Kathleen Christie. We did
say those one more time, Michelle.
All right, Michelle Loveday,
Uh-huh.
Kathleen Christie, and Nikki Walker. I can get you their contact information if I get your email. I did a documentary last year. I did what's the documentary? Push Out. I did that last year, and it's a documentary addressing Black girls in school. So they started a commission to actually work on this. I'm on that commission, but not an active member. But there is a commission that's actually working on this very topic. So I can send you their contact.
That'd be great. I would really appreciate that. And I know Samantha, Commissioner Eldrige, you had expressed an interest in this area of this area. So I'm wondering if I don't know how the Open and Public Meetings Act works with us discussing, forming a subcommittee and working on this issue outside of the General Commission. I don't want to run afoul of the Open and Public Meetings Act, but I'm wondering what we can do to, because I mean, this issue alone could take a lot of work, but I don't want it to be sidelined.
I'd like to make a comment. This is Luna Benuri.
Go ahead, Luna.
I appreciate, the discussion around SROs. That's something that I've been involved in as well. I am also part of the commission that Commissioner Shifflett just mentioned. It was in support with the MLK Commission that it started work and everything. My issue here is another subcommittee means more time. And I think some of us are involved at so many different levels. It takes away from the main discussion where we can actually make a difference, taking it to another subgroup. And so I would suggest to keep it in the main group and keep working on it and keep our eyes on it, because honestly, the bandwidth is getting pretty low to be able to take part in all these different side discussions. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. This is Katie Lewis, the City Attorney, and I'm just jumping in to address Commissioner Salazar Hall's question about the Open Meetings Act in case you want to form subcommittees. And the rule is that a subcommittee just needs to be less than a quorum. And I believe your quorum is 11. So as long as you're meeting in small groups, you can certainly do that outside of your public meetings. We would recommend that any findings or recommendations are brought back to the group, because the point is to be transparent and let the public know the types of conversations that you're having.
Thank you. I will also, as we're having an open discussion, I don't want us to forget about the survey that Carol brought up as well, with the police department internal of how they feel about in-house racism. And even the diversity makeup, is that something that we are aware of? The diversity makeup within the Salt Lake City Police Department?
Mm-hmm.
We can get that information.
I remember a report about the race ethnic makeup of police departments throughout Utah. I think I'd seen it something like a couple of years ago. So I think there's something out there, but I'm not exactly sure. But
I'm just speaking up from the council staff, because we requested that information recently. We have that and we can get that to you. Just the diversity makeup. Absolutely. So we can get that to you guys.
Thank
you. And I just want to say, I agree with Luna. We're on every commission online or every Zoom call, and it does tap you out. So we need to be careful as to what we do take on the side, because just as I said, when I did push out with the commission, I kind of started something, but I went ahead and let the Multicultural Center take the lead on that because I knew I couldn't do anything else. So I agree. Be careful in what we take on so that we don't get lost.
Thank you.
And just real quick, for the youth subcommittee members that are here, I know Nicole was talking about possibly tapping you guys to see what y'all's thoughts and perspectives are about SROs or school-based law enforcement programs. Just FYI.
Let me chime in real quick. Yeah, so I've seen, obviously recently being younger, I've been in the school system more recently, and just kind of, I'd like to, if we did do something on that, I would like to work on that commission or whatever ends up happening with that discussion personally, because I think I have some experience with the youth, working with peer corps, and not just that, working at a middle school here. They don't have SROs, but they do come and play, and I'd like to be part of that discussion. I think that's something we would like to see and how they're handled. And I was it is something they sent, and I was just kind of skimming through it before the meeting, and that's something more I'd like to discuss in depth. If we could maybe add that to the agenda or something, just kind of we understand that. And obviously I don't want it to kind of take too much focus, but it is something I would like to discuss. And on that hand, kind of the youth subcommittee would also kind of, all these policies and everything that we're discussing, if we could just have somewhere common.
Wait a minute, hold on. Is this your youth commission, your youth subcommittee status report?
I
If so, hold on. If so, hold on, you're jumping the gun a little bit.
Yes. We'll get there when we get there. But I think the SRO conversation is something important because they are in the schools. They do interact with the children on a daily basis. And I want to make sure those are good interactions or how other students feel about them. Or like, I remember personally for me, when they would walk around, I don't know, I felt like an ominous presence. Like, why is the police consistently here? And is it like, do they need to be here all the time? But it was just kind of thoughts. Those were my thoughts kind of going through my head with SROs as a student. And, you know, so that's just something I would like to, you know, discuss more in depth, but I don't want it to take too much time.
Yeah, and you know, I know my bandwidth is limited. I know all of ours are. We all have day jobs. We all have work we're doing and other committees we're a part of. So my idea of a subcommittee was something so that anyone who's interested in this would be willing to take that extra time to do it on a voluntary basis. I'm not going to volunteer anybody. And if it's a subcommittee of Commissioner Salazar Hall, then it'll be just a subcommittee of Commissioner Salazar Hall. I'm fine doing that. I'm fine taking up that laboring war because it is an issue that is near and dear to me. So I would like to make sure that this stays on the radar. I don't think this is something that we should just let go into the ether because it does affect our children of color.
No, can I just make a comment?
Commissioner Salazar Hall in these efforts. I think having a separate subcommittee looking at our K through 12 system, not just as our SROs, but I really think it's important that we also include that conversation. I was concerned with the recent release by the Utah State Fraternal Order of Police and their requests regarding teaching critical race theory, or even their concerns with educators speaking about Black Lives Matter or wearing t-shirts. So my concern there is the intent versus impact, and then also unintentionally policing our students while they're in school, and how that also plays into the high rates of school discipline that we have in Utah. And so, I mean, if that's something Commissioner Salazar Hall can support each other on the side as far as co-chairing that subcommittee.
I'd like to make a correction here. In no way am I suggesting that this should not be the work that we should be doing. My concern is to keep it in the main group because we are all interested. We all have some part knowledge, and we have brought in a youth committee who obviously has some direct stuff to say about it, and not make it a side conversation, but leave it in the main group and take it on.
That makes a lot of sense, Commissioner Banuri, and I completely appreciate that. But I know that this is going to be a lot of side meetings with like the superintendent or school board members or other principals of schools that have SROs in them, and that's something that we can't. I don't think this commission has the full bandwidth to do. So I think if we can keep this group to under 11, which I'm pretty certain we can keep it to under 11, and report back everything that we would like to do, what we are doing, people we've spoken with, and if the larger commission wants to hear from them directly, I think we could put that on the agenda as a specific action item. It's just that I think this is such a small specialized feature, and I want to keep addressing as a larger group this larger issue of race in policing and these shootings that keep happening. I don't want to detract from that because I think that is a very huge concern, but I do also think that the SROs issue really contributes to a lot of what we're seeing on this other macro level. So that's why I would like to do a subcommittee, as I think it's a little bit more specialized. It's a little more of a, I don't even know the word, but it is a more specialized kind of aspect of everything we're working with right now. And if it means that there are a few of us who do just a bit more legwork to talk to individuals and we bring that back to the commission so that the larger commission can have a full discussion about it and make recommendations, I think it would help everyone else who I know has a limited bandwidth here. And I do appreciate everyone's time, that we're all volunteers here and none of us are getting paid for this at all. So I do appreciate that I'm willing to put in that work and to put that time in. And if it means me leading a small subcommittee of 2 or 3 or 1, then great. But I do think there's value in having a specific subcommittee that brings back that work that we're doing.
I would also like to add to what you were saying, Nicole, the connection between that with the school to prison pipeline, because they're connected.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they are. And everything that Nicole has highlighted is extremely important to all the work that the commission is doing. I think I'll agree to disagree for the subcommittee at this moment, but I do agree with the importance of this work.
Thank you, Luna.
Well, it sounds like you have some volunteers already ready to jump in there. So, Steve, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I trying to figure out the new technology on my phone. Just a couple thoughts. One, I'm really curious what the facilitators can help us accomplish once we get them on board and we prioritize what we want to do as a commission and get their support. So I wonder if a subcommittee conversation might be good once we get those folks in place. I would support an SRO subcommittee, also a data evaluation subcommittee. But anyway, just a thought on maybe procedurally, if we have a conversation with them and understand their role more effectively. And I appreciated during the public comment periods the conversations about accountability and policy and practice. And I feel like in addition to the comments that were already made on that, this idea of culture, of police culture, and that's one of our aims, is to evaluate that culture and make recommendations. And part of that culture is to buy into the policy and follow it, right? So I think as we do our evaluations and we do our own personal work, particularly as it relates to those of us who choose to team up with officers, I really want to make sure that that we have those investigators and internal affairs folks and human resource people in there as we look at the way that accountability is identified and the way we hire, we promote, we retain, we transfer to ensure that we get the right people in the right places. Anyway, so just a couple comments on a couple different areas, but I think that's pretty important to understand that accountability piece and how the training and the follow through is all part of that process. So I'd love to see that as part of our team up. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you, Steve. If there are no further items, that would be actually a great segue to our final item, that to let you know that that was actually the final item on our agenda for the evening. And I will turn the time over to David, and I know I can't pronounce your last name, for an update on the facilitator search.
Thank you, Darlene. Hi, commissioners. So we are in the contract phase, and we should be done hopefully very soon. The contract has not been completed or signed yet, but we are moving towards that very quickly. And So very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Is it LiveVac? Help me out here.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you. Next, we will hear from our youth. Oh, did anybody have any questions for David before I move on? We good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, David. Next, we will hear from our youth subcommittee on a status report.
Yeah, so I was going to provide an update, but I think I'll let both our youth subcommittee members talk. So can y'all give us a quick update of what's been going on the last few weeks? You're on mute. Oh, I'm not.
1 second. Yeah, hold up. Let me find something. So as of now, we have the panelists set up for the next couple of weeks up until October 21st. So those are set and planned. We will update those and send those out who will be our representatives. And we're doing bi-weekly representatives. So they will be at 2 meetings and they will do that. And then the next 2 will come in and they'll do 2 weeks and then the next 2 and then so on, so on. And we'll try to switch it up with different partnerings. And we do meet on Saturdays at 10 o'clock to kind of go over what happened in the last meeting, to kind of spread the information to the others so we're all up to date. Last time we met, they said they wanted to review all the policies and all the trainings the police go over. So we want to be able to access those documents. They were sent over, but we hopefully we can get more somewhere to easily access all this information. This is, as I go over it, it's about.
You put yourself on mute.
Yeah. I don't know how you fell into mute again. Okay.
There we go. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to go over it, and in 2 weeks, maybe even shorter, come back and discuss specific policies we have as youth that we have issues with or like to discuss further. I know we discussed some of them earlier today. I think those were good discussions, but we want to further those and kind of go over everything separately by ourselves, kind of give our 2 cents on that subject. And then they said we also wanted expedited public release information surrounding the shooting of Lyndon Cameron. So I was wondering if that's probably something we wanted to kind of discuss more, kind of see, kind of like the body cam footage, or kind of, we know it's an ongoing kind of investigation. It might be hard to get some of the information, but that's something we want the police kind of to be able to release so we can see and discuss properly. Yeah. I'm not sure if the song has anything else to add.
No, I don't have anything else to add. Those are the points we talked as a youth committee, and after we review the policy, I will get back to everyone.
Thank you. Moises, you want to have anything to add before we move on?
No, I think they did great.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, we do not have a closed session discussion tonight, so I will look for a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Samantha. Is there a second?
Moises seconds.
Thank you, Moises. Okay, now we'll take a roll call vote. Reverend Davis?
He had to leave early, or he had to leave just a little bit ago.
Okay. Nicole?
Aye.
And I for Darlene. Moises, you made the motion.
Aye.
Batar,
Aye.
Verona,
Aye.
Mariana.
Aye.
Is Tanya still with us? Stephen,
Aye.
Luna,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
and Betsy.
Aye.
Oh, hey, you made it. Hi. Alosa.
He did have to leave, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Samantha.
Aye.
Oh, Samantha made the motion. Okay. Anthony.
Aye.
Excellent. And Carol.
Aye.
Rohio. Did I say that? I got it.
You got Rohi, and then you need the EO.
Rohilio. Rohilio. Okay. Okay. The son.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. The motion has passed and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Good night.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.